"May I have your leftovers, sir?" But when the millionaire looked into her eyes, a miracle happened. Under the dim glow of chandeliers shaped like frozen stars, the hum of wealth whispered through every corner of Le Pavillon, the most exclusive restaurant nestled in the beating heart of the city. It was a night draped in velvet stillness, broken only by the soft elegance of a piano weaving through the air. Every table was a quiet kingdom of power and prestige, lit by candles and crowned by crystal. In the farthest corner, tucked behind an arrangement of orchids and shadow, sat John Maxwell, 48 years old, tech mogul, billionaire, and widower. His Armani suit was tailored to perfection, his platinum watch catching stray flickers of light, but none of it could cover the hollowness in his chest. He stared blankly at the untouched filet mignon before him, its aroma rich and inviting, though it might as well have been dust. Across from him, the empty chair echoed more loudly than any sound in the room. His fingers tightened slightly around the stem of a Bordeaux glass, the red swirl inside dancing like a ghost. 10 years had passed since the accident, since his wife Lillian and their 3-year-old son Caleb had vanished from the world in the crush of twisted metal and shattered glass. Since then, John had filled his life with silence, routine, and an empire of distractions. He lifted the glass slowly, as if the weight of it held memories. But just as he brought it to his lips, a voice broke the air beside him. Soft, trembling, unexpected. "May I have your leftovers, sir?" John froze. He turned his head sharply and found himself looking down at a young woman standing beside his table. She could not have been older than 19. Her blonde hair was pulled into a loose, messy bun, with strands falling out in weary curls. Her coat was threadbare, clinging to her shoulders against the early autumn chill. In her arms was a baby, perhaps 7 or 8 months old, wrapped in a faded blanket. The infant's eyes, wide and luminous, were fixed on the mound of mashed potatoes and slices of meat still steaming on John's plate. The girl's voice had been almost a whisper, yet somehow it had sliced through the quiet of the restaurant like a violin string snapping. John blinked as if waking from a long, dense sleep. Around him, the room stilled. Forks paused mid-air. Conversations trailed into stunned silence. A waiter began to step forward, concern already wrinkling his brow, but John raised a hand subtly. The gesture was small yet commanding. He studied her face. There was no shame in her expression, no hint of manipulation or pity-seeking, only exhaustion and something deeper. A quiet fierceness, a need not for herself, but for the tiny life held close to her chest. She held the child with the kind of protective devotion that stripped everything else from the moment. She was not begging. She was not stealing. She was surviving. John's throat tightened. The candle between them flickered. In that instant, something shifted inside him. Not a grand epiphany, not yet, but a murmur, a spark. And though he did not know it then, that one moment, that single question, would dismantle the walls he had spent a decade building and lead him toward a redemption he never sought, through a love he never expected. He stood there for a long moment, frozen, his gaze locked on the girl, as if the rest of the world had melted away into background noise. Her blonde hair was unbrushed, falling in disheveled waves around her face and shoulders, the strands catching glimmers of candlelight like broken gold. Her coat barely covered her frame, sleeves too short, the fabric worn thin at the elbows. On her feet were a pair of sneakers, tattered, soaked in city grime, and nearly splitting at the seams. But it was not her appearance that made John's breath catch. It was her eyes. They did not beg. They did not waver. They held him, unflinching, filled with something far stronger than desperation, defense, dignity, and a quiet, almost unbearable sorrow. There was a kind of courage in her expression, the type a person only forges when they have nothing left to protect except the fragile life they carry. She was not asking for herself. She was asking for her child. John hesitated, just a heartbeat longer, as if some unseen thread was being pulled taut between them. Then, with a slight movement, he nudged the plate forward. "Take it," he said softly, almost to himself. She did not dive at the food. She did not devour it like someone starving. Instead, with a reverence that struck him harder than any scream could have, she reached into the satchel draped across her shoulder and took out a small square of cloth, clean though fraying at the edges. She carefully wrapped the mashed potatoes and the remaining slices of meat inside, folding the corners like she was preserving treasure, not leftovers. Then, kneeling gently onto one knee, she cradled the baby closer and retrieved a small plastic spoon from her coat pocket. John watched, unblinking, as she scooped a modest portion of the warm food and blew softly on it before guiding the spoon to the baby's mouth. The child opened instinctively, his tiny lips parting, his tongue reaching. The moment the mashed potatoes touched his tongue, he cooed, a soft, gurgling sound of joy so pure it made John's fingers curl around the edge of the table. The baby's face lit up in the glow of candlelight, his chubby hands patting the girl's chest, a smile blooming across his round cheeks, like a sunrise after a long, frozen night. It was the kind of smile John had not seen in years, not since his own son. Something caught in his throat. He looked away, just for a second, trying to clear the sudden mist from his vision. But his eyes snapped back as soon as the baby let out another happy sigh, as if the warmth of one spoonful was enough to fill him with delight. The girl said nothing. She simply kept feeding him, one spoonful at a time, with infinite patience. Her hands were steady, her breathing was calm. She did not once look around to see who might be judging her, or what opinions were forming in the silent sea of wealthy onlookers. She was there for one reason only: to feed her son. John's heart twisted in his chest, slow and deep, like something old waking from a coma. It was not pity. It was not charity. It was the undeniable truth that he was witnessing something sacred, a kind of love that could not be bought, replaced, or even fully understood by those who had never felt loss. When the baby seemed full, the girl carefully tucked the cloth bundle into her bag, adjusted the blanket around the child's body, and stood. She glanced once more at John, nodding slightly, not as if to thank him, but as if to acknowledge something unspoken between them. Then she turned and walked away, weaving through the rows of white linen tables, out into the cool night beyond the glass doors. John remained seated, unable to move, staring at the spot where she had stood. The candle on the table flickered softly, casting gentle waves of gold and shadow across the untouched wine, the empty chair, the world he had known. Then, before he could rationalize or analyze or talk himself out of it, he rose. Not hurriedly, not dramatically, just quietly, with purpose. He placed his napkin on the table, nodded once at the stunned waiter who hovered nearby, and followed the girl through the heavy restaurant doors into the night. He did not yet understand why, only that he had to. John followed at a distance, his footsteps muffled against the quiet pavement. The city noise faded behind him as the girl slipped down a narrow alleyway, clutching the baby to her chest like a fragile shield against the world. She moved quickly but cautiously, as if every shadow might swallow her whole. He did not know why he followed, only that something deeper than curiosity pulled him along. It was not pity, it was recognition. The alley opened into a crumbling parking lot flanked by brick buildings. Abandoned cars sat like ghosts, but one, an old dented Navy sedan, was different. It was lived in. The windows were fogged, the paint was peeling, but it was shelter. She walked to it without hesitation, opened the back door and carefully settled in with the baby. A thin blanket served as a mattress. She cradled the infant in her arms, whispering something only the child could hear. Then her voice rose, soft and trembling, to a lullaby. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." John lingered in the shadows, transfixed. The baby's hand gripped her collar, eyes fluttering as the melody wrapped around him like a warm quilt. The setting was bleak, but the love undeniable. He stepped forward. Something must have alerted her. She turned, startled. Their eyes locked. "I'm sorry," he said, hands raised in peace. "I just wanted to see if you were okay." "You followed me," she said, guarded. "Yes, I did." She didn't run. She didn't cry. She only looked at him, weighing the stranger in the expensive clothes. "I saw how you fed your son," John said. "I've never seen anything like that. I needed to understand. After a pause, she said quietly, "His name is Noah. I'm Emily." "Noah?" he repeated. 8 months? She nodded. "He loves mashed potatoes." John's voice dropped. "So did my son." Emily blinked, and in that instant something shifted. She didn't pry, just listened with that rare stillness of someone who knew grief firsthand. "I was studying to be a nurse," she said. "Then I got pregnant. The father disappeared. My parents disowned me. I've been on my own ever since." She spoke plainly, without bitterness. "We've lived in this car for 2 months. I clean houses, wait tables when I can." John looked at the vehicle. The worn blanket, the baby clothes stacked like treasure in the corner. "I can help. A hotel, food, whatever you need." She raised a hand. "No, I'm not asking for money." Surprised, he asked, "Then what do you want?" Emily looked at Noah and said softly, "Just one day. One day where he's warm, full, and safe. That's all." The words hit him harder than any demand ever could. The streetlight flickered above them, casting an amber hue over her face. In that glow, John saw something familiar. Her eyes. His late wife's eyes. Not exactly, but close enough to crack something inside him. The way Emily clutched her child, the way she stood tall with nothing but love as armor. It stirred something in him, something that had been buried with his wife and son. He stepped back, suddenly unsteady. "Thank you," he said. Emily furrowed her brow. "For what?" "For reminding me I still have a heart." She said nothing, only cradled Noah tighter, resuming the lullaby. John stood there a little longer, the song threading through the night like a lifeline, and though Emily didn't smile, she didn't close the door either. And that, somehow, was everything. From that night on, John could not shake the image of the girl with the broken shoes and the baby with the mashed potato smile. No matter how many emails he skimmed through or board meetings he attended, their faces stayed with him. Quiet reminders that somewhere in the same city where people drank $800 0-cent wine, a mother and child were surviving on kindness and resilience alone. He never spoke to her again, not right away. Instead, he began to act, silently and precisely, the way he'd built his fortune. He had found her car again, parked behind an abandoned church lot. Without approaching, without intruding, he left small packages near the vehicle in the early mornings before sunrise. A canister of baby formula, a pack of diapers, a sealed container of homemade soup, still warm to the touch. He arranged for a pediatrician to make a discreet visit, pretending to be part of a church outreach program. Emily didn't know who had sent him. She didn't ask. But when the doctor left, she held Noah longer than usual and whispered thank you to no one in particular. At first, Emily was skeptical. She had learned to survive by expecting disappointment. But these quiet gestures never came with notes, never came with expectations or requests. No one asked her to smile. No one asked her to be grateful. It was simply there, steady, gentle, real. Little by little, suspicion gave way to something more dangerous, hope. Then, one evening, as October cold began seeping deeper into the nights, disaster struck. Noah had been cranky all afternoon, refusing to eat. His forehead was warm, but by nightfall he was burning with fever. Emily tried everything: cool cloths, gentle lullabies, rocking him back and forth in the back seat of their car. But his cries grew more urgent, his breathing shallow and fast. She rushed to the nearest hospital emergency room. The woman at the front desk barely looked up when Emily explained that her son needed help. When asked about insurance, Emily hesitated. When she said she didn't have any, the woman's face hardened. "We're at full capacity," she said curtly. "You'll need to wait or find another facility." Emily's voice broke. "He's only a baby. He has a fever of 104. He's not responding. Please." "Ma'am, there's nothing we can do without proper intake. I'm sorry." Emily stepped outside, her breath clouding in the freezing air. Noah had gone quiet, a terrifying silence. She held him tighter than ever, her body shaking with cold and panic. There was only one thing left she could do. She pulled out her old phone. Her fingers trembled as she typed just 2 words: "Help us." She didn't know if he would come. She didn't even know why she trusted that he might. But 6 minutes later, headlights swept across the curb. John's black SUV screeched to a halt. He jumped out before the engine stopped, his coat flaring in the wind, eyes wild with urgency. He didn't speak. He simply held out his arms. Emily placed Noah into them, and for the first time, the baby did not resist. His tiny hand curled around John's index finger, weak but intentional, as if recognizing something safe. John cradled him with surprising familiarity and strode back into the hospital without waiting in line. "I want a doctor, now," he said to the receptionist, voice steel and fire. "This child has a critical fever. I will cover every cent. But if you let one more minute pass, I will buy this hospital and fire every last one of you." They took Noah immediately. Emily sat in the hallway, shivering with exhaustion, her head in her hands. John stayed by her side, silent. When the nurse returned with updates, Noah was stable, resting, and would be monitored overnight. Emily exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding since sunset. She looked at John, eyes glassy, voice barely audible. "You came." He nodded. "Of course I did." Tears spilled over before she could stop them. She leaned into him, chest heaving with relief and something deeper, grief maybe, or release. Her head rested against his shoulder, and John, without hesitation, wrapped his arms around her. He did not ask her to calm down. He did not ask her to explain herself. He just held her as the quiet hours of the night passed outside those sterile, fluorescent walls. It was the first time Emily had let herself fall apart since she'd become a mother, and for John it was the first time in 10 years that holding someone didn't feel like betrayal. They did not speak of love. They did not define anything that night. But something shifted irrevocably in that moment, in the steady heartbeat of the man who had once sworn never to care again, and in the breath of the girl who had only known how to survive, not because he had rescued her, but because finally she did not have to be strong alone. It began with a photo, slightly blurry, taken at night, of John Maxwell exiting an emergency room with a baby in his arms and a young woman close behind. Within hours, it flooded social media, blogs and tabloid headlines. Tech billionaire's late-night rescue, teen mom and the tycoon. The internet exploded. Emily's identity didn't stay private for long. A leaked hospital intake form confirmed her name. Then came the commentary, waves of speculation, judgment, and cruelty. Some praised John, calling him compassionate, generous. Others were vicious. "She's a gold digger. This was planned. What kind of man gets caught up in something like this?" In the apartment John had arranged for her and Noah, Emily sat in darkness, the only light from her phone. Each swipe brought more venom. Each headline, more shame. Her chest tightened. Her hands trembled. She turned off the screen, afraid the light alone might touch her son with that same poison. Noah stirred in his crib. She stood and gently placed a hand over his chest, soothing him. Then she sat back down on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor until morning. When John walked in, he knew something had changed. Emily's posture was closed off, her expression distant. "I can't do this," she said. "I don't want my son growing up in scandal. I don't want him seeing lies one day and wondering if they're true." John sat beside her. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said softly. "Neither did Noah." She shook her head. "People don't care. They already decided who I am." John's voice steadied. "Then let me tell them who you really are." That afternoon, he called his publicist. No statements, no scripted press release. He wanted to speak plainly, publicly, and with no filters. The next night he went live on national television. The setup was simple, a quiet studio, soft lighting, no distractions. The interviewer asked nothing shocking, just gave him space to speak. John began not with Emily, but with Lillian and Caleb. He told the story he had avoided for years, the accident, the silence, the way grief had hollowed him out. He talked about the illusion of success and how it had hidden a very real emptiness. "I stopped living the day they died," he said, and then he spoke of Emily. "She wasn't looking for charity," he said. "She wasn't even looking for help. She just wanted to feed her son, and in doing so, she woke something in me I thought I had lost forever. His voice cracked as he added, "She didn't take anything from me. She gave me something no one else could, a reason to care again, a reason to breathe." He looked into the camera. "Emily is not a headline. She is a mother. Noah is not a prop. He is a beautiful child. I did not save them, they saved me." The interview was raw, unguarded, and deeply human. And it worked. The next morning the tide shifted. Online conversations changed. People began defending her. Mothers shared their stories. Single parenthood, poverty, judgment. Nurses spoke up, explaining how many girls like Emily fall through the cracks. Donations started flowing into shelters. A mother in Kansas started a community fund for women just like Emily. Emily didn't speak to the press. But the next morning, she showed up at John's front door, Noah bundled against the cold. She didn't knock. He opened the door before she could. Her eyes were tired but determined. "I'm not leaving," she said. "If you still want us, we're here." John did not speak. He stepped aside, let them in, and for the first time in years, he felt something shift, permanent and peaceful. A door, not just in his home, but in his heart, opened. A family, unexpected and unscripted, had begun. The apartment John rented for them was nothing extravagant, modest by his standards, but warm, sunlit, and quiet. It had 2 bedrooms, soft gray walls, and windows that caught the morning light just right. Emily moved in with nothing but 2 duffel bags, a baby carrier, and the weight of someone who had never been given a safe place to exhale. But within a week, that space began to feel lived in. Pictures colored by Noah taped to the fridge, small socks draped over the heater, the scent of baby lotion and lullabies lingering in the air. They never discussed what they were to each other. Not at first. There were no declarations, no labels, no timelines. They simply lived together. John visited every morning. At first it was under the pretense of checking in, bringing groceries or a package of diapers, but soon it became routine. He would knock, let himself in, and Noah would light up with recognition, bouncing in his crib at the sound of the door. Emily would already have coffee brewing, her hair pulled into that same loose, graceful knot, and they would share breakfast, stories. John learned how to hold a baby bottle at just the right angle, how to warm milk without overheating it, how to change a diaper, clumsily at first, then with a confidence that surprised even him. He memorized the rhythm of Noah's cries, understood the difference between hunger and discomfort, tiredness and frustration. One afternoon, as he rocked Noah to sleep, the baby's small hand clinging to his shirt, John realized something simple but seismic. He didn't want to leave, not after the nap, not after the next hour. He wanted to stay. Emily noticed it too, the way John lingered, how he listened to Noah's babbles like they were symphonies. He never tried to impress or control. He simply showed up, day after day, with quiet hands and eyes that had once been hollow but were now slowly refilling with light. She had never known love that didn't ask for anything back. But she had never known a man to simply be present, not to fix her, not to own her story, but to walk beside her in it. In the soft hours between feedings and bath times, a new kind of connection formed. It was not the fiery kind of love the world romanticized. It was slower, deeper, born not from passion, but from persistence. One evening, after Noah had finally fallen asleep, Emily and John sat on the balcony in silence, a blanket draped between them. The city below glimmered in gold and blue, but neither of them looked down. John turned toward her, his voice gentle. "When I lost Lillian and Caleb, I thought that part of me died with them. The part that wanted to care, to belong, to be needed." Emily looked at him, eyes glistening in the moonlight. "You didn't lose it," she whispered. "It just waited." They didn't kiss that night. They didn't have to. The moment stretched between them like a promise, unspoken, but deeply understood. And in that moment, Emily smiled. Not the kind of smile she gave nurses out of politeness or Noah out of reflex. This one was just for him, full and rare. For the first time in years, John smiled back, a real smile. Quiet, softened by healing, lit from within. They were not yet lovers, they were not yet a family in name, but they were something stronger. Two people who had been broken open by loss and found in each other the slow and steady beginning of home. It came one afternoon in a plain white envelope, wedged beneath the apartment door like an unexpected gust of wind. Emily stared at it for a long time before opening it, her hands trembling slightly as she unfolded the letter inside. The handwriting was familiar, tight, neat, and unmistakably her mother's. There were only a few lines, no grand apology, no dramatic pleas, just simple words written in ink that seemed to press too hard on the page. If there's still a chance to know my grandson, I would like to try. Emily sat at the kitchen table for over an hour, the letter crumpled gently in her hands as Noah played nearby with his stack of colorful blocks. She didn't cry. She didn't get angry, but the silence that filled the room was thick enough to suffocate. When John arrived that evening, he found her in the same spot. "She wrote," Emily said quietly without looking up. He walked over, picked up the letter, and read it. Then he set it down and took a seat beside her. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "It's been almost 2 years since they last spoke to me, since they told me I was no longer their daughter." John nodded slowly. "You don't owe them anything." Emily turned to him, eyes clouded with uncertainty. "But Noah, doesn't he deserve to know where he comes from, even if it's broken?" John paused, choosing his words carefully. "Don't let him grow up with the same emptiness you had. Let him have the chance to forgive, or not, but let him choose." 3 days later they drove to the town Emily once called home, a sleepy stretch of green hills and narrow roads, where every face seemed to remember the past a little too well. Her parents' house stood at the end of a gravel driveway, the white paint slightly faded, the porch swing still creaking in the wind. Emily stood outside for several long moments, Noah on her hip, his tiny hands gripping her sweater. John stood slightly behind her, offering quiet support, but letting her lead. The front door opened slowly. A woman stepped out, mid-50s, sharp features softened by time and sorrow. Emily's mother. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, with a trembling breath, her mother stepped forward. Her eyes landed on Noah, then on Emily, and they filled instantly with tears. "I wasn't strong," she whispered, her voice catching. "I was scared of what people would think, of losing the version of you I thought I raised, and I lost you anyway." Emily said nothing. Her lips parted slightly, her jaw tightening. Her father appeared behind her mother, older than she remembered, his hands folded nervously in front of him. He looked at his grandson like he was seeing something holy. Noah reached out a hand, not knowing the history, not caring, just curious. And that somehow shattered everything. Her mother broke down, stepping forward, arms open but uncertain. May I hold him?" Emily hesitated only a moment. Then, slowly, she placed Noah in her mother's arms. The older woman clutched him as if trying to hold time itself. She sobbed softly, whispering things to the boy who blinked up at her with innocent wonder. John watched from the side, his chest tight. He wasn't part of this moment, but he was witness to its power. When Emily finally stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her mother, the porch seemed to breathe. The past had not disappeared, but it had been softened. Forgiveness was not a lightning strike. It was a slow sunrise. That afternoon, the 3 generations sat around the old kitchen table where Emily once ate cereal before school. Her mother served tea. Her father bounced Noah gently on his knee, and for the first time in years, there was laughter in that house. Emily caught John's gaze from across the room, and he smiled. She mouthed 2 simple words. "Thank you." He shook his head, smiling back. "No," he whispered to himself, barely audible. "Thank you for going home." 1 year later, the world had changed, but only in the ways that mattered. The noise had faded. The headlines were gone. In their place was something far quieter, far more powerful. A life. It was a bright spring afternoon when they returned to the park. The same park where it all began. The breeze moved gently through the trees, and the golden sunlight bathed the open field in a warmth that felt like a benediction. There were no towering floral arches or photographers jostling for the perfect shot. Just a small group of close friends, a white linen cloth spread beneath an old oak tree, and a humble wooden arch wrapped with ivy and ribbon. At the center of it all stood a little boy in a navy new vest and matching bow tie. Noah, now nearly 2 years old, clutched a small velvet box in both hands as he wobbled across the grass, determined to deliver it to the man waiting just a few steps away. John stood there, not in a designer suit, but in a soft gray blazer that Emily had once told him made him look almost human. His hair was longer now, with threads of silver he no longer bothered to hide. His eyes, once clouded by grief, now sparkled with something far rarer than wealth: hope. As Noah reached him, John knelt down and took the box gently from his tiny fingers. The boy looked up and giggled, then toddled back to the edge of the clearing where Emily stood barefoot on the grass, her white dress fluttering in the breeze. She had never looked more beautiful, not because of the dress, not because of the sun behind her, but because of the life in her eyes, the kind of radiance that only grows after surviving darkness. John stepped forward, box in hand, and dropped to one knee. For a moment, the wind seemed to still, as if the world itself paused to listen. He looked up at her, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "You didn't ask for anything," he said softly. "You didn't beg. You didn't expect. You just showed up, on the worst night of your life, and gave me a chance to remember what it feels like to be needed, to be alive." He opened the box, revealing a simple ring, elegant, unflashy, chosen not for its price, but for the way it would look on her hand when she held their son. "You didn't take my leftovers, Emily," he whispered. "You gave me everything I didn't know I was missing. You gave me family. You gave me love. You gave me a future." He paused, tears glimmering in his eyes. "Will you marry me?" Emily's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filled before the first tear could even fall. She nodded, once, twice, then dropped to her knees in front of him, laughing through her tears as she whispered, "Yes." They embraced, arms folding into one another like pieces of a puzzle long lost and finally found. The minister began the ceremony, simple and short, while Noah played with the petals on the ground, occasionally glancing up as if trying to understand what made the grown-ups so emotional. But it was during the vows, right as John promised to love not just Emily, but the son who had brought them together, that Noah wandered up and wrapped his arms around John's leg. "Daddy," he chirped. And just like that, the entire park held its breath. John looked down, eyes wet, and bent to pick up the boy. Holding him with one arm and Emily with the other, he whispered, "I love you, son." In that embrace, under the sun, with no audience but a few friends and the sky, everything that had once been broken felt whole again. John had not rescued a young mother. She had rescued him. From grief, from isolation, from a life so polished and empty it had nearly swallowed him whole. And in the place of loneliness, a new family had been born. Not from blood, not from planning, but from a whisper, a question, and a plate of mashed potatoes. They were not perfect. They didn't need to be. They were together. And that, finally, was enough. And so, from a single whisper in a luxury restaurant, a story of love, redemption, and second chances unfolded. What began as a request for leftovers became a journey that redefined what it means to be a family. John didn't just open his heart, he opened his life. Emily didn't just survive, she found home. And little Noah, once cradled in a stranger's arms, now walks beside a father who chose him not by blood but by love. Because sometimes the most extraordinary stories are born from the quietest moments. If this story touched your heart, made you feel, made you hope, or even brought a tear to your eye, don't forget to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories, the channel where every story is made to heal your soul and remind you that compassion is the most powerful miracle of all. We'll see you in the next story.